A record-breaking slap on the wrist. I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle now. And Bill, Mark Zuckerberg received a dressing down, let's call it, from the Federal Trade Commission, which in a 3-2 vote decided to fine Facebook some $5 billion. He also faces, his organization faces a $100 million fine from the SEC related to privacy violations. In addition, the FTC has worked out an agreement without going to court, basically, that there will be a third-party independent monitor of Facebook's privacy policies and the implementation thereof, that there'll be an independent internal board with members that can be removed only by a 2/3 vote of the shareholders to oversee privacy, that Mark Zuckerberg himself will not be on that board. And all of this sounds fairly punitive, Bill, but a lot of people are saying this is just a slap on the wrist because, after all, Zuckerberg wasn't fired. Zuckerberg wasn't made to step down, despite the fact that millions of people's private information was jeopardized in the Cambridge Analytica scandal from last year.
He wasn't fined personally, if I understand you correctly.
He was not fined personally. In fact, he is the one who has to certify to the FTC that his company is in compliance going forward with these new rules under, penalty of lying to the government. So he's still on his throne, and Facebook did not acknowledge doing anything wrong. $5 billion fine is not peanuts, Bill, but how does this strike you?
But it is. I agree. It's a record slap on the wrist. That's a really beautiful way to put it. The privacy issue is one of two issues here, and the other one is the editorializing, is the suppression of videos that Mark Zuckerberg and his team of elitists up in wherever the hell they are make decisions based on what they think people should see versus what the people themselves say they want to see when they click a like button. As far as the privacy issue goes, there's the idea, I know this is obvious to our audience because we have a well-educated audience, but when you win a case or something like this against somebody who's done you harm, you get an award for the damages, which is something intended to make whole the harm that was done to you. So here's some money for the harm we did to you. And then there's punitive damages, which is an additional sum, which is designed to make sure that you don't do it again. And since nobody here is really bringing a case of harm, the question is $5 billion punitive for Facebook? I suspect that the money's not. I do think, however, that it's starting to dawn on Mark Zuckerberg as he spends more and more time in Congress hearings, congressional hearings. It's, I think, beginning to sink in on him that this is not his personal playground. It is his company, no question, but the data that is collected as a result of his groundbreaking and revolutionary website is not his to play with. I saw something recently. It was in a commercial for a documentary called The Big Hack. And needless to say, in the documentary, it turns out that the problem is not that all these super progressives are making decisions on everybody's lives. The problem is that data is being leaked to the Trump administration. But let's just put that aside for a second. There was an assertion in that documentary that data has surpassed oil as the most valuable commodity in the world. That data is now the most valuable commodity in the world, and it makes sense because when you think about how much sales actually goes on, if I buy a gallon of gasoline, I bought a gallon of gasoline, but if somebody has access to what I want to buy, we're no longer talking about $4 a gallon. Now we're talking about their ability to influence the buying habits of the entire world, not just the American public. So he is now an oil baron of information, and it's a monopoly. And not only is it a monopoly, they're drilling for oil in your backyard, and you didn't give them permission to do it. So they're getting rich off of your oil. Now, if that comes across sounding Marxist or socialist or so on, I assure you I'm not speaking about it in that way. I'm not saying that this is communally owned. I'm saying it's privately owned, that your data is your data, and people are stealing it from you and selling it to other people for large sums of money.
So Facebook has agreed to put in place new privacy protections and those monitoring things that I told you about. But perhaps the central element of this news story can be boiled down to this fact. Facebook agreed to do this with the FTC.
Sure.
The two commissioners who voted against this ruling, by the way, it was a 3-2 vote. The two commissioners who voted against it not because they thought it was too harsh, but they thought it was too lenient. They wanted to press for taking it to court.
Really? Okay, so what can we deduce from this? We can deduce, first of all, that if you simply agree to a fine, and that's a hefty fine. It's not a bank-breaking fine. I don't think it's enough fine to make them change their behaviors, mind you, but it gets your attention, $5 billion. So I think what we can deduce from this is that the fact that Facebook was willing to take the deal, especially as part of it being included the idea that they don't have to admit that they did anything wrong. I think the reason you jump at I'll write you a check for $5 billion deal is because you know that if you do go to trial, you're going to lose more money than that and maybe even more. Here's the thing in a nutshell as I see it, Scott. I don't think that any financial incentive is going to change Facebook. I think Facebook makes so much money and these people are so deep in their own gravity well that there is no amount of financial fine that will make Facebook or Google, YouTube, and all the rest of them change their behaviors. I think the only thing that will make them change their behaviors is the imminent threat of antitrust laws coming to place and essentially disassembling those companies. I think that is the only thing that will create actual change. No doubt they'll have their committees and external review boards, and there'll be all the colors of the rainbow, and you'll have on this selection committee on privacy, you'll have every American political view from far left on one hand to extreme left on the other. And so they'll go through the motions of all of this. They'll write their $5 billion check, and then things will go on as they went on before. Because these people, like Zuckerberg and the founders of Google and all the rest of these guys, they're not in the same world we are. They don't live on the same planet, and they don't have anything like. I have a funny feeling, a strange kind of sick feeling that they think they have the public's interest at heart. You know, we're going to connect the world. Okay, you're going to connect the world so that you can tell the world what to see, what not to see, and then take money from them, make money off of knowing who their grandparents are. But they don't know anything about real people. They don't know anything about any of this stuff. It doesn't matter to them. Any time I've ever heard testimony from the folks at Apple or Google, any of these tech giants ever, nothing I have seen, not one thing I have seen ever that showed any respect for privacy, constitutional protections of privacy, freedom of speech, none of it. It's all just algorithms for them. And so when I say that I don't think that a monetary fine is going to do it, I think they're making so much money that it doesn't really matter to them. They're not afraid of having to pay fines. They're afraid of losing control of the world. That's what they're afraid of.
Now, Bill, since you mentioned Google and algorithms and the idea of bias through those algorithms, I'm going to add another element to this story, which would seemingly be unrelated, but touches on all those things. James O'Keefe over at Project Veritas has a new video out. And in this video, instead of his normal recording somebody who doesn't know they're being recorded or recording somebody who's sitting in front of a very bright light so you can't see their face, he actually has a Google senior software engineer who works in the area of AI on camera. His name is Greg Coppola, and he is saying things like, I really don't buy the idea that big tech is politically neutral. And are we going to just let the big tech companies decide who wins every election from now on? And I look at search and I look at Google News and I see what it's doing, and I see Google executives go to Congress and say that it's not manipulated, it's not political. And I'm just so sure that's not true. Bill, this is clearly O'Keefe's effort by putting this guy on camera without any corroboration. It's O'Keefe's effort to surface others to be brave and to come forward and sit before the cameras. Where do you think that's going?
Well, it's not going anywhere at all and will accomplish nothing unless some people in Congress have the guts to stand up and do something about it. This is the consequence of conservatives not coming out to vote in 2018. We no longer have the House of Representatives. And so if we did have the House of Representatives, we could put the fear of God into these people. And frankly, I personally think we are way past putting the fear of God into them. Now I think it's time for thunderbolts to start flying and smash up these corrupt companies. So the fact that he's coming forward with this is it's kind of like a guy saying on television that organized crime networks exist in New York City and they do criminal things and they've even killed people. Okay, we knew that. Can you provide specific cases with evidence of law breaking?
And that seems like what O'Keefe is trying to call out here, because when I looked at it at first, I thought, well, here's somebody doing primary journalism, which you don't see a lot of out there. But really, it's not, because he's got no corroboration. What he's really doing, and in the video, you can clearly see he's telegraphing to other Google employees, come, tell me your stories. The question is, are people willing to step away from the free yogurt bar at Google's headquarters long enough and risk their careers like Greg Coppola is doing here to be able to say, yeah, I've seen this happen?
Again, whether or not they are is not relevant. What's relevant is if people come out of those buildings with cargo containers full of smoking guns, it doesn't matter unless somebody in law enforcement is ready to actually do something about it. Now, the Justice Department, which was the most corrupt of the organizations, makes Tammany Hall look like a bunch of pikers, is now in different hands. And if Donald Trump is reelected in 2020, that'll give us 5.5, 6 years rather than just another year and a half to do something about it. If it goes back to the Democrats, then these are why do you think guys like Zuckerberg write such big checks to the Democratic Party? And why do you think they fought so hard to get Hillary Clinton elected? And why do you think that they are doing everything in their power to make sure that nobody hears the alternative message? I can't stress this strongly enough, folks. They did not expect Donald Trump to win under any circumstances. That was just not part of the equation. And when he did win, they had a 1-year-long temper tantrum. And at the end of that, the progressive left in these information companies, along with Hollywood and the Clintons and all that whole crowd, decided that Hillary Clinton lost the election because the American people got a chance to hear the other side of the argument, and they're not going to make that mistake again. So just as something for you to weigh, just as a clear example, I'm proud to say that the Apollo 11 series, what we saw was, depending on the episode, was either the number 3 to number 5 podcast in the world. And when you went to Apple Podcasts looking for Apollo 11, the most successful podcast on Apollo 11 that Apple had was not listed when you searched for Apollo 11 because it was produced by Daily Wire. And so it simply wasn't there. It wasn't available. If you didn't know for what you were looking for by name, the number 3 podcast in the world, the number 1 podcast on the Apollo program would not show up in your searches for Apollo because Apple doesn't like Ben Shapiro. And that means that Apple and Facebook and all of these guys have already decided what you're going to see and not see. You just don't know it yet.
You mentioned the other day on one of our other programs at BillWhittle.com that you think that we may have reached peak social media. I guess the question in this story is whether Congress and regulators have reached peak social media and had enough. And it's frankly surprising that a smackdown of Facebook, for example, happens during the Trump administration rather than the Obama administration, which was supposedly all about protecting the little guy and being a stronger regulatory hand.
Yeah, that was yesterday's Democratic Party. Today's Democratic Party is about putting little bags on the back of cows to save the planet from imminent incineration. When I do think we're past peak social media. I don't think I'm not aware of anybody in the last 4 or 5 years being excited about Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or anything. I see more and more people leaving it. I see more and more people swearing off of it. I see more and more damage and so on. And when you think about it, and this I think is an actual solution, because like it or not, social media does provide a lot of benefits. Needless to say, we're not going to go into the specifics, but there is a technology called blockchain, and it is self-encrypted. Nobody has the key to this except for the two people in the transaction. It is unbreakable encryption. And I have just thought recently that all the people in the world need, all the American people need, just take America as an example, from social media, is they need the connection to people, so that essentially every single person would be their own Facebook. Every single person would go to whatever content they wanted and say, I want to see this, I want to see that. Oh, here's my friend from high school. There's no staff. Nobody runs it, because nobody needs to run it. All it does is connect people with the mutual agreement to connect. And you send an invitation to your grandma, and she says yes, then she's part of this personal, individual network, and that would accomplish all of the benefits of social media in terms of speaking to your high school pals, or you got a Gator football face page or whatever. You'd have all of the benefits of that, and you'd have none of the manipulation, because nobody can see the data. Nobody can see who you're connected to. The only person who knows who you're connected to is you. It could be a black hole in the center of the internet, and it's just a singularity, and connections go in and they come out the way they came in, but nobody else can see anything. That technology already exists. And so rather than breaking up Facebook and all the rest of these things, if somebody would come along with an absolutely secure social media platform that was secure because it was not touched by human hands, I think that Facebook and YouTube and Google would go out of business organically, the way they should go out of business.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we do this work for the members at BillWhittle.com, and they pay their membership fees for you, those people who are watching this at no charge around the world. We're grateful for their contributions to this. We know that their passion to get this message out is as vigorous as ours is, and we're proud to be part of their team. If you'd like to become a member at BillWhittle.com, just go to that website and click the Become a Member link. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for making this happen.